Hello everybody and welcome to the Penelope Possum channel with your hostess Penelope the Possum. And we are going to be watching the 3 Dr. Bob videos and a video from a new channel we haven't reviewed before on Spooky Megala. So let's get going.
They call him the Grill Master. At least, he says they do.
Just gotta readjust everything so I can bear listening to everything here.
Never clarifying who calls him that. But he's got the custom-printed apron to prove it, worn over his flannel shirt. It features orange flames over a black material, a skull with 2 spatulas crossed underneath it, and his assumed title emblazoned at the top. He's the Grill Master, and nobody can take that away from him. His barbecues are legendary, famous throughout the state, or at least known about by the other fathers living on the street, either because they've been to one before or witnessed the huge column of smoke billowing upwards from behind the house and blotting out the sunlight. Flames roar from the barbecue, beers are being chugged, kids are running around screaming, all under the scorching heat of the Florida sun. The Grill Master stands proudly at his station, smiling to himself in the knowledge that this could well be his most famous cookout of all. He's never hosted one this attended before. It's
Dang.
sure to make the neighbors forget about the divorce. One of the kids rushes over to him.
Why was that like a discount dollar store version of Peggy and Hank Hill?
Wielding a blue and green water gun. Trouble. The Grill Master warns them not to spray near the fire, but the kid just giggles in response. It's all a game to them. They have no idea the reputation on the line. The Grill Master issues another warning,
Pineapple?
but the unruly child protests, whining that they just got this water gun at a yard sale and they haven't been able to shoot anyone yet. With a sigh, the Grill Master closes the lid of the barbecue, protecting the precious meat from the stream of water he's expecting to be fired any moment now. Sure enough, it streaks through the air and splashes him, seeping through his custom apron. The child is placated, and the Grill Master goes to wipe the water with his hand, only to feel an intense burn against his skin. He recoils, staring at his hand in horror as the skin begins to melt before his eyes. He tries desperately to pat himself dry, only for the searing pain to reach his chest as whatever the corrosive liquid is melts its way through the fabric and starts eating away at his flesh.
Oh my god,
Little does
what
the
hell
Grill
is
Master
happening?
know, as he falls to the ground writhing in pain, something tiny is being carried through his bloodstream, wriggling its way into its new home. Him. A suburban summer barbecue that ended in chaos sounds like perfect folly for the SCP Foundation. It didn't take long for the Foundation's operatives to swarm the small Florida town,
What the
managing to stay
hell?
undetected thanks to the wide-scale administering of amnestics on the local populace.
What? Also, aw, too bad for that guy. Looks like his legendary barbecue is gonna be forgotten about immediately. Rip. Pineapple. Oh, I misread that at first.
None of the neighbors, nor any other local residents, ever remembered what had happened. The creature they'd seen, and the unfortunate victim that had become its host, were scrubbed from everyone's memories. Local hospital and employment records for the man were expunged, and what was left of an injured civilian was taken into Foundation custody, along with anything else from the scene of the incident that could serve as evidence. Foundation scientists immediately got to work examining the man, who was suffering badly from chemical burns. However, the researchers' focus was on trying to determine the exact point of origin of something that had manifested inside his body when he'd been sprayed. Some scattered suggestions arose about making an attempt to separate the two, to try and save the civilian's life from whatever had bonded itself to him. An assessment revealed that the man the creature was now seemingly using as a host was still alive, but rapidly losing brain and motor function. As a result, saving his life was deemed by the finance department to be an
Yeah, that went sideways in a friggin' snap. Oh my gosh. I think that's the quickest something has gone that sideways. Like, everyone was having a good time, and then, bam! Just because some little snot-nosed brat wanted to soak somebody with their super soaker. This guy's now an SCP object. What the heck?
An inadequate allocation of Foundation time and resources. Researchers at the Foundation were told to ignore the man's pleas for help and instead focus solely on the creature. It didn't take them long to determine the obvious, that whatever this organism was, it was unlike anything found on Earth. From closer testing and examination, it seemed that what had bonded with the human host was some kind of unidentifiable unicellular organism, which the Foundation scientists took to nicknaming Kelvin. They were able to take a closer look at Kelvin, discovering that the single-celled life form was largely comprised of an organometallic polymer and enamine chains.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
As well as being radically distinct from any life form native to...
Are we not going to explain what any of those words mean? Are we just gonna continue with the thought that we all know what those words mean?
Earth. Foundation researchers were baffled by how exactly this tiny organism had embedded itself in a human body, or more concerningly, why. Based on its structure and chemical composition, the unicellular creature didn't seem at all suited to survive in the conditions within a human being's body. The Foundation's top scientific minds were able to run a number of simulations to determine the perfect environment for housing an organism such as Kelvin would be a liquid solution of dissolved methanol, formaldehyde, and acetic acid, along with various salts. Of course, these chemicals all naturally occur within the human body. Methanol, also known as wood alcohol, is in fact present in a number of organisms, including animals and plants, as well as human beings. Fresh fruit and vegetables, some fermented beverages, and even diet sodas that contain aspartame are all good sources of methanol. Formaldehyde and acetic acid are both derived from methanol as well, and are commonly created via chemical reactions in order to be used as the base materials in products like acrylic plastics and synthetic fabrics, making all three of these chemicals present in clothing, adhesives, and paint, as well as within a human body. As part of the metabolic process, humans naturally produce around 1.5 ounces of formaldehyde, as well as acetic acid, which actually helps to metabolize certain fats and carbohydrates. However, while all the necessary chemicals and salts for
So there's formaldehyde in the human body. That's interesting.
Kelvin's survival were present in the body it was now living in, that didn't mean that the single-celled creature was necessarily suited to being inside a living host. For one, a human body is itself a more complex organism than a unicellular life form like Kelvin. As a result, the body's natural defense systems made it a dangerously hostile habitat for unexpected visitors. Human antibodies typically don't take kindly to intruders and will often attack foreign cellular bodies in order to protect vital organs and keep them functional. The same way that a human body protects itself from viruses was also defending the unwilling host against Kelvin. Although Kelvin was draining its host's metabolic system of methanol, formaldehyde, and acetic acid to survive, thus weakening the immune system, it wasn't enough to prevent antibodies from attacking the unicellular life form. The longer the man was kept alive, the more antibodies he was producing, and these were eroding holes in the cell wall that protected Kelvin. So once again, the Foundation scientists faced another dilemma. Did they keep the host alive and help his body reject Kelvin? Or did they experiment with strengthening the single-celled organism in order to see what happened? The decision was deferred from the research team up the chain of command. The finance department made the same case that the Foundation's resources were better spent on understanding this single-celled anomaly, but the ethics committee was quick to argue that the Foundation's job was to protect the public from anomalies. By letting Kelvin's human host die, they'd be abandoning their primary mandate. Eventually, the decision reached the O5 Council, who were alarmingly quick to sidestep the ethics committee's concerns and approve the research team to keep Kelvin alive and functional, no matter what it did to the host. So, following the orders of the council, researchers focused all their efforts on Kelvin. They were able to introduce and synthesize a solution containing all the necessary chemicals that the unicellular creature needed to survive, a cocktail of methanol, acetic acid, salts, and formaldehyde, which they then introduced to the host's bloodstream. Sure enough, this abundance of the chemicals it needed for nutrition only strengthened Kelvin, so much so that within days, it was able to resist antibody attacks. The cell wall surrounding it was impenetrable, and the near-microscopic organism's mass started to rapidly increase, the more essential metabolic chemicals that it absorbed, both from the scientists feeding it and what little its host had left. Within weeks, Kelvin's host resembled a withered, desiccated zombie more closely than a living human being. Intravenous bags of synthetic metabolic chemicals were hooked up to his body, with Foundation personnel instructed to disregard his weak pleas for someone to help him. A few raised concerns whenever his heart rate lowered to the point he had almost flatlined, but this only ever resulted in an electrical jolt that jump-started his regular heartbeat. All the while, Kelvin was being fed. Scientists had been observing the unicellular life form through specialized microscopes, meaning they hadn't noticed the change right away. Focusing in on the same spot soon became akin to staring at a singular drop in an ocean. Taking x-rays of the host suddenly showed a dark mass spreading out within their chest cavity. It was clear that Kelvin had undergone something of a growth spurt. Where it had started as a single cell, since the Foundation had started nurturing it, Kelvin had begun producing its own mass within the human host. Before long, it was substantially bigger, so much so that it was observable without the equipment needed before. However, some of the scientists weren't exactly put at ease when they noticed alien twitches coming from beneath the host's skin. It quickly became apparent, even to those who hadn't seen the X-ray images, that Kelvin had changed in shape as well as size. The creature seemed to have fit itself within its host's chest cavity, but the more rapidly it grew, the more it posed a risk of becoming too big to stay inside the unfortunate human. 3 appendages, thought to be arms or legs, were curled up right over where the man's stomach should have been displacing his organs. The rest of Kelvin's newly grown form seemed to vaguely resemble a sunfish, one of the largest vertebrate fish in the world. Further scans revealed that Kelvin's increased size meant the creature was also developing its own set of internal organs and bones, almost like an embryo, rather than the single cell it had started out as. The Foundation
funny thing about embryos, they start out as a singular cell, usually.
Might not have known exactly what kind of creature Kelvin was, or indeed where it had even come from in the first place, had it not been for an emergency incident that took place in one of their facilities. It just so happened that the same site where researchers were keeping Kelvin alive inside its host became the target of an attack by none other than the Chaos Insurgency, the dangerous splinter group that formerly served as part of the Foundation. The attack had been swift and brutal, with Chaos Insurgency operatives storming the facility with ruthless efficiency. Thanks to their training from disavowed members of the Foundation's elite mobile task force Alpha 1, the Red Right Hand, these insurgents were able to navigate the halls of the research site in an attempt to raid it for anomalous items that they could use in their ongoing war against the SCP Foundation. Since they were established by the O5 Council, the Chaos Insurgency had a long and storied history of operating under the cover story that they were traitors to the Foundation, stealing anomalies in secret to further the Council's own shadowy agenda. However, they had long since defected and now served their own nefarious agenda, launching strikes against Foundation facilities, seizing SCPs with dangerous potential, and eliminating Foundation personnel. The aftermath of the Insurgency's attack was a mess. The bodies of Foundation researchers and personnel had been left strewn throughout the hallways of the research facility. Cleanup crews were given the unpleasant task of removing the remains and wiping down the bloodstains, while research staff from other sites were called in to take over the various projects and anomalies being studied by their less fortunate colleagues. That was when they found Kelvin. In one of the facility's labs, a Chaos Insurgency operative was discovered dead, pinned beneath the body of something inhuman. What little was left of Kelvin's human host had been splattered in multiple directions. The scattered fragments of a ribcage found by cleanup crews suggested that the creature had burst out of the body it had been inhabiting, either because it felt
oh my god, Calvin was a chest burster. Gross.
Threatened somehow, or its host had sustained damage during the Chaos Insurgency's raid. Sure enough, security footage was recovered from a backup of the site's closed-circuit surveillance system that corroborated the working theories about what had happened to Kelvin. In the footage, a platoon of Chaos Insurgency gunmen stormed through the facility, exchanging fire with security personnel as they systematically cleared every room on every floor, one by one. Squads split off to examine anomalies, looking for any that would suit the insurgency's goals, while the rest of their forces continued the raid. At one point, though, a lone insurgent split away from the main group and wandered into a research lab. Stepping inside, they were met with the sight of Kelvin's human host, almost entirely emaciated, barely alive. Either out of cruelty or a willingness to put the man out of his misery, the insurgency operative produced a sidearm and terminated the host. Upon their death, the body began to convulse violently, the movement emanating not from any kind of post-mortem muscular spasms, but from something moving around inside the host's body.
I'm sure either if it was cruel or for cruel intentions or for mercy, I'm sure the guy was thankful that guy put him out of his misery. God, that is no way to live. That is no way to live.
The Chaos Insurgency operative reacted by opening fire with their weapon again, before the host's chest ruptured and Kelvin, now fully formed, spilled out. Able to move uneasily on its 3 legs, the creature launched itself at the insurgent, either in an attempt to attack in confusion or retaliation, possibly even trying to pass from its previous host to a new one. Traces of cyanide were discovered in the Chaos Insurgency operative's mouth, suggesting that they had a contingency against Foundation capture in place. It was suspected that the surprise from seeing a creature like Kelvin erupting out of a cadaver made the insurgent accidentally bite down on a cyanide pill disguised as a tooth. At this point in the footage, the Kelvin creature seemed to stop moving, losing consciousness. By the time it was discovered after the raid, it had already perished. Foundation researchers brought in to take over the examination project were at a loss. All of the work done to nurture Kelvin and grow it inside a human body had seemingly now been for naught, thanks to the Chaos Insurgency. Uncertain of how to proceed, it wasn't until another security recording surfaced that the researchers were given their best lead as to how to continue the project. And it came from the most unlikely of sources, a Foundation security officer. During the Chaos Insurgency's assault, the officer had been captured by surveillance cameras fleeing for his life. Having run out of ammunition and frantically searching for an additional magazine or another weapon to defend himself with. However, thanks to the Chaos Insurgency's knowledge of the Foundation and their expectation that mobile task forces would be deployed to counter their attack, their operatives had first seized control of the site's armory. The only option that left the fleeing security agent with was to scour the areas of the facility the insurgency was yet to reach, which drove him towards an evidence room. Frantically emptying boxes, looking for something even remotely resembling a viable self-defense option. In his search, the security cameras showed the Foundation officer discovering a piece of evidence recovered from the Florida barbecue where the Foundation had discovered Kelvin. It was an unassuming water gun made out of blue and green plastic with an orange nozzle and trigger. When interviewed following the raid, the security officer clarified that his intention had been to surprise a Chaos Insurgency operative, temporarily blinding them with a spray of water directly to the eyes, then disarm them, relieving them of their firearm to use it to defend himself. This wasn't what happened. Little did the officer realize that he had just retrieved the missing piece of the puzzle when it came to the question of the unicellular lifeform's point of origin. The water gun wasn't a simple child's toy. It was SCP-3788. Upon discovering the anomalous water gun against a member of the Chaos Insurgency, the security officer unexpectedly doused the target with a pressurized jet of liquid ammonia. On contact, the corrosive substance dissolved the insurgents' bodily tissues, rapidly and agonizingly melting them. Their injuries were fatal. Following the discovery of this incident, the Foundation's researchers requisitioned the anomalous water gun. It had been incorrectly stored as evidence following the Florida incident, with the previous research team too fixated on the development of Kelvin to notice what had appeared to be a harmless child's toy. Researchers began investigating the object's capabilities in an attempt to determine a link between the ammonia-firing water gun and the now-deceased specimen of a single-celled organism. Testing didn't take long to yield the answers they were searching for. The screw cap for filling up the gun with water was sealed shut and impossible to open. Threading a fiber optic camera through the gun's nozzle only showed what looked like the empty interior where water would normally be. Yet, as Foundation personnel soon discovered, SCP-3788 itself was where Kelvin had come from. The gun itself contained a spatial anomaly, linking it to an unknown location. When fired, the high-pressure jet of corrosive liquid ammonia that was released was from wherever this spatial anomaly led to. Upon further examination of the dangerous chemical released whenever SCP-3788's trigger was pulled, Foundation experts discovered the presence of other chemicals, namely dissolved methanol, formaldehyde, acetic acid, and various salts, exactly what Kelvin had needed in order to survive. Also contained in the ammonia solution were several unidentified unicellular organisms, each consisting mainly of organometallic polymers and enamine chains, and unlike any other life form found anywhere on Earth. In short, they were more of Kelvin. Through continued usage of SCP-3788, Foundation researchers were able to use the anomalous water gun to eject multiple additional samples of these single-celled organisms. Capturing these, they were able to cultivate them in much the same way Kelvin had been allowed to grow, but without the need for human hosts, instead preserving them in ammonia tanks and feeding them the same synthetic solution that had allowed Kelvin to grow from its unicellular form. On occasion, use of SCP-3788 would result in the ejection of an unidentified organism that resembled a sunfish, each possessing 6 eyes and 3 limbs. On further inspection, these creatures also shared a similar biochemistry to the single-celled organisms and to the deceased remains of the Kelvin test subject. Testing using SCP-3788 was suspended, however, following an incident now designated Incident 3788-G. 4 months into their experimentation with the anomalous water gun, the object unexpectedly ejected a 35-meter-long metallic vehicle, which was propelled out at the same velocity as the liquid ammonia. This caused it to crash through several rooms of the Foundation facility, resulting in numerous workplace injuries and a handful of deaths that have since caused
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that would happen with an entire submersible coming into a place where it's not supposed to be usually.
the Foundation dearly in compensation. The vehicle itself seemed to resemble a submarine. When Foundation agents opened up the metal hatch to its entrance, a group of 8 organisms emerged. Each displayed signs of sapience, as well as sported 3 legs and appeared to resemble sunfish, much like Kelvin had. However, all 8 of the creatures quickly lost consciousness, suffering from atmospheric shock, and were immediately rushed to ammonia tanks to keep them alive. An inspection of their vehicle by the Foundation uncovered pictograms, as well as a written language that has only been partially translated. Based on this information, the Foundation has cause to believe that the creatures originated on Titan, one of the moons of Saturn, and that this is where the spatial anomaly within SCP-3788.
Bull! I highly doubt any creature could ever live in a place like that. I don't even know if there's liquid ammonia on Titan. What? Why are you sad? What are you sadding about? What are you being sad about, dummy boy? What? Is your brain too small?
Leads to a conclusion that almost nobody suspected, but was undeniably and literally out of this world. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-3852, More Bodies in the Water, Small Town Justice. The dentist is clocking out after an especially long day. A root canal, a wisdom tooth extraction, too many cavities to count, when her cell phone rings. She answers and is surprised to hear the panicked voice of her wife on the other line. Her heart stops for a moment as she imagines the worst, a car accident, a house fire. But after listening for a moment, she's able to gather enough context to relax. Their son lost his first tooth today. There was a bit of blood on his face, which had sent her wife into a bit of a state. But now, as they both realize it was nothing more than a standard rite of passage, the moment of terror is over. When the dentist arrives home, she finds her wife and son sitting at the kitchen table with dinner ready, and her wife is in the middle of a story. She's telling their son, who listens wide-eyed and rapt, all about the magical creature known as the Tooth Fairy. Later that night, After they
Oh yeah, this one's, as you can see, SCP-478 Tooth Fairies, so it's another tooth-related one.
have read the boy a story and put him to bed,
Only-
the two mothers remind him to put his freshly lost tooth under his pillow. When he wakes up, they promise the Tooth Fairy will have left him a surprise. They wait for him to fall asleep, and then, when they hear his gentle snoring, it's time for the swap. The mother who works with teeth all day opts to do the honors. It only seems fair. She sneaks into the room, careful not to wake the boy, and lifts the edge of his pillow. Hang on. What happened to the tooth? She can't see it anywhere. She lifts the pillow just a bit more, but she can't find it. What she sees instead is a fluttering motion as something small and winged darts out from underneath the pillow. She covers her mouth to stifle a startled scream. It's just a moth, she realizes, as the little winged shape darts around the darkened room. Nothing to worry about. The tooth probably got lost in the sheets. Nothing to worry about. She slips a quarter under the pillow and sneaks back out of the room. She doesn't stay long enough to see the little winged creature, the thing she thinks is a moth, fly toward her son's face, landing in his open mouth. The next morning, the boy is delighted to find a shiny quarter under his pillow. He is less delighted to find that he has come down with a sudden case of the sniffles and sneezes. As the dentist heads off for another day of work, her wife calls out from her own job, opting to keep the boy home from school today, just in case. Meanwhile, the dentist is hard at work once more. Today is a bit less stressful than yesterday, but not by a wide margin. Her first patient of the day refuses to sit still while she checks for cavities, nearly kicking her in the process. After they leave, she takes a moment in the back with a cup of coffee, centering herself. When she walks back into the waiting room, she sees her wife sitting there with their son. What are they doing here? She asks her wife, and sees tears in her eyes as she struggles to answer. She turns to their son and asks him what's wrong. He doesn't say a word. Instead, he just opens his mouth. The tooth he lost the day before has grown back. But that's not all. His
That's not good.
mouth is full of teeth. And that is not hyperbole. There are teeth all across the roof of his mouth, the insides of his cheeks, covering his tongue. The dentist suspects that if she shone a light down his throat, she would see teeth all the way down. She'd better call in a specialist, because this is no job for an ordinary dental practitioner. It isn't her fault. She could never have been prepared for her son to come down with a case of SCP-478. SCP-478 is a species of small
creepy
entities
little
of
thing.
varying size and shape, which resemble a darkly colored butterfly or moth when in flight. Though they have been encountered in the wild frequently, they are elusive and difficult to capture. Instances of SCP-478 that have been contained do not appear to have a need for food, sleep, air, or reproduction. There is still little known about the nature and motives of SCP-478, but this much is clear. They are predatory in nature and tend to target humans.
Fish.
Huh?
That thing with the teeth reminds me of the sheep's head fish.
It does look like a sheep's head fish.
Humans under the age of 25, especially those who have not yet lost all of their deciduous teeth. When an instance of SCP-478 finds its prey, it will enter the victim's mouth while they sleep and attach itself to the soft palate in the upper nasal cavity, blocking one of the nostrils. After the creature has embedded there, the victim's body will begin to produce an excess of mucus. With the stuffy nose and increased mucus production, the victim will wake to believe they have come down with a cold. A bit of an annoyance, sure, but nothing some rest, lots of fluids, and a bit of grandma's chicken soup recipe can't cure. That would be true if it were, in fact, a cold. But as the condition progresses, the victim soon realizes that they have come down with more than a case of the sniffles. Soon after waking up, the victim's palate will begin to generate teeth at a rate far faster than ordinary tooth growth. The more teeth grow in, the faster they grow, and the more quickly they spread. These teeth will
Well, luckily for, I think, the majority of my audience watching tonight, I think we're all safe from this. Because it says it only affects people under 25 who still have their deciduous, or I think what most people call them, baby teeth.
continue to sprout from the palate, more and more teeth emerging through the skin, until the entire palate has been covered. But it doesn't stop there. Oh no. It continues down the victim's throat and into the esophagus. Over the next several days, usually between 2 and 4, the growth of teeth will continue down into the stomach lining, filling the stomach. Then, teeth will begin to grow in the lungs, making it difficult to breathe, then will grow from the subcutaneous layer of skin. The law of conservation of matter comes into play as these teeth sprout. The calcium required to produce them can't just come from thin air. It must come from somewhere in the body. In this case, that would be the skeleton. Skeletal calcium is leached away to provide new teeth with the material they require. As you might imagine, this process is extremely painful and downright unpleasant in every way. Now, there's no polite way to put this. The ultimate stage of the infestation involves teeth growing downward through the digestive tract. The growth stops once the entire digestive tract has been filled with teeth. Then, the SCP-478 instance will fly out through the victim's mouth, leaving the tooth-filled victim behind. These teeth are, aside from their placement, ordinary. They contain a root, nerve, enamel, just like any tooth you might find in a mouth. You know, where teeth are ordinarily found. The parts of the body where the teeth have formed may expose them to unusual conditions, such as the high concentration of acid in the stomach. Teeth that form within the skin, on the other hand, group together and form large, hard masses of dental material beneath the surface of the skin. The method by which SCP-478 induces this heightened growth of dental tissue is currently a mystery. At first, Foundation research into the nature of the anomalous beings resulted in few leads. But then, one potential lead emerged in an unlikely place. In order to understand the nature of this lead, then I must first take us back in time to the year 1956. Dr. Razman Yelkov was issued a task.
Whoa. Okay, no, we're not just gonna slap the single ugliest guy I have ever seen on the screen suddenly and expect that to just roll. We are not doing that here tonight, my good friend. Wow, that is a profoundly not handsome guy. My goodness. That is certainly interesting.
By his comrade, Dr. Grigori.
Jeez,
Grigori asked Yelkov to develop a method that would allow him to produce perfect specimens of human teeth. New, authentic specimens, not taken from a cadaver or made from an alternative material. It seemed like an impossible task, until a fellow doctor told him stories of an unnamed man who had found something impossible.
There's the classic Dr. Bob style right here. Classic Dr. Bob drawing style here.
Tooth fairies.
These guys so
Dr.
weird?
Yelkov's colleague brought him to the man with no name, who told him all about these fairies. While traveling during the war in search of remedies, the man said that he met and captured a fairy called Isabella. This Isabella taught the unnamed doctor the fairy language and appointed herself his assistant. From there, Isabella taught the unnamed doctor about the methodology of the fairies, how they could draw enamel from human bones, and how they used that enamel as a source of nutrients to sustain themselves. Naturally, Dr. Yelkov had his doubts about the strange man's claims. He asked for proof, as any of us might in the face of fairy tales, and the doctor with no name was happy to provide it. He took Dr. Yelkov to his workshop, and upon stepping through the door, the doctor was met with a sight of at least 50 fairies fluttering around the room, their dark, iridescent wings beating as they flitted to and fro. This was it, the secret key he had been looking for, the way to unlock the seemingly impossible task he had been issued. The man offered Dr. Yelkov a room for the night, and he accepted, with the intent of learning more about the secrets of the fairies in the morning. But the events of the evening did not go according to plan. When Dr. Yelkov offered to purchase some of the fairies from the man in order to use them for his own research, the offer was refused. Dr. Yelkov, ever the ruthless pragmatist, drew his weapon and fired one single shot through the unnamed doctor's heart. With no one left to stop him, he grabbed a large jar and began to capture the fairies. He managed to catch 30 of them in total before setting off on the journey back to his own laboratory. Once Dr. Yelkov was back in his laboratory, he examined the fairies more thoroughly. They looked like ordinary butterflies at first glance, but a closer look revealed humanoid characteristics: arms, hands, legs, and faces. While inspecting and performing autopsies on several of the creatures, Dr. Yelkov determined that the specimens contained unidentified chemicals which react with the oral environment. He isolated these chemicals for further study. Now, the real work could begin. Dr. Yelkov analyzed the way in which the fairy's physiology interacted with sodium monofluorophosphate and hexafluorosilicic acid, and in doing so, was able to reproduce the effects a fairy might have on a human body, recreating it on a common fungus. This was not enough for a finished product, however, as the fungus had no source of calcium that would allow for the formulation of human teeth. He would have to test his new research on human subjects in order to truly gauge its effectiveness. For his first test subject, he selected an 8-year-old child from a camp in Moscow. She was injected with 20 milliliters of the serum he had managed to develop and observed for 10 days without any notable changes. Then, on the 11th day of the trial, the patient was short of breath and complaining of abdominal pain. An X-ray showed a large mass beneath her left lung. 2 days later, the patient was dead, and Dr. Yelkov extracted a large mass of calcium from her lower left abdomen. The cause of death was massive internal bleeding caused by this very mass. Over the course of several more human trials, Dr. Yelkov fine-tuned his serum. It was producing calcified masses in the bodies of the subjects, sure, but Dr. Grigori was expecting teeth. He was getting closer, though. By trial 4, he had managed to create teeth, though they were undeveloped and had not fully grown to the proper size and shape. But it was progress, grim and gruesome as the process was. By trial 19, he had cracked it. The test subject was the teenage daughter of an American businessman named Kyle Schrader, a man so greedy and craven he had sold his own child for medical testing, all for a hefty chunk of change, $2.6 million, courtesy of Dr. Yelkov's patron.
Damn. That is some fucked up shit, man.
Dr. Grigori. This trial was, frankly, horrific to read. I've pored over some disturbing scientific documents in my time, but never something that distressed me quite so much as the tale of a teenage girl sold by her father, made a lab rat by a mad doctor, treated without anesthesia, and lobotomized when she complained. But Dr. Yelkov did not see it as a horror. He was simply elated that his labor had yielded that most calcium-rich of fruits, teeth. He packaged the extracted tooth specimens and sent them to Dr. Grigori for approval, along with 7 other dental practitioners. Now, I am not one to express a belief in karma, per se, and Dr. Grigori's exact fate is unconfirmed to this day, but I can believe we can extrapolate what became of him based on what the Foundation learned about Dr. Yelkov's work. And if my guess is correct, then I believe Dr. Grigori got exactly what was coming to him. When SCP Foundation agents raided Dr. Yelkov's laboratory, they discovered a series of phenomena that were later designated SCP-1994. These, as we can now surmise, were the results of Dr. Yelkov's research with SCP-478. SCP-1994-1 is a serum, the chemical makeup of which has been rather difficult to pin down. Some samples of the serum have had higher levels of sodium monofluorophosphate, while others have had higher levels of hexafluorosilicic acid. Either way, application of this serum stimulates the growth of both maxillary and mandibular tooth structures, all outside of their usual environment of the human mouth. These resulting structures are classified SCP-1994-2, and though they appear identical to human teeth at first glance, they lack the basic structures of teeth. For example, they have no dentin layer or pulp tissue. They are simply solid pieces of dental enamel and are highly vulnerable to decay. As these enamel pieces decay, they release a white powder that is capable of infecting those who inhale it with a version of SCP-478's effects. Individuals infected with SCP-1994-2 powder, or who have been administered a dose of SCP-1994-1 serum, are termed SCP-1994-3. Once exposed, the infection progresses through 5 stages. First, there is initial exposure, after which the subject has no visible signs of infection for up to 2 weeks. Notably, this infection works far less quickly than a direct infestation of SCP-478. During this 2-week period, calcium deposits will begin to develop throughout the person's body, as cell structures ordinarily used for immune system response will reorient to become capable of gathering the components for producing enamel. After the 2-week period is up, and these calcium deposits have been effectively cooking under the skin the entire time, the subject will begin to develop cysts all over their skin, beginning on the limbs before progressing to the head, neck, back, and groin. These cysts are painful to the touch, and the subject will be compelled to resist any attempts to remove them in spite of the pain and discomfort. As the cysts grow and spread, they will rupture the skin and slowly decrease the metabolic functions of the subject. At a point approximately 5 weeks after initial exposure, the cysts will burst open, revealing the mature, adult human tooth that has been growing beneath the surface. Once the tooth has emerged, it cannot be removed from the skin tissue except via surgery. Once the subject has reached this stage, the breakouts of teeth will occur faster and faster, spreading until they have covered all of the extremities, and then will begin to manifest in the soft tissues of the palate, the inner ear, and ocular tissues, spreading to every orifice. This stage of the infection resembles an infestation of SCP-478, though the teeth are lacking the interior nerve and pulp present in those created by SCP-478. Though the teeth may be removed through surgery, as I mentioned, the surgery is only a temporary fix. After any teeth are removed from the body, new growths will form in their place. After 8 weeks following initial infection, the entire body of the subject will be covered in a layer of teeth, or SCP-1994-2. But then, it all gets even worse. The teeth will begin to develop carious lesions across all of their surfaces. It is unknown how these teeth decay, given the fact that they are not exposed to any acid-producing oral bacteria. But they do decay just the same, and the process is highly unpleasant. Over the course of no more than 7 days, all the thousands of teeth across the subject's body begin to show signs of gross decay and release that aforementioned infectious white powder.
Oh, I think I see how he died, probably then. Well, it looks like that doctor got exactly what was coming to him with all this.
This is possibly due to the use of fungus in the serum's development phase, as this white powder is somewhat reminiscent of fungal spores. After the subject's body is covered in fully rotten teeth, they will perish in the ultimate stage of infection. The cause of death is due to the combination of weakened immune system, exposure to massive amounts of decay, and the inability to eat anything or receive nutrition intravenously. No subjects have lived longer than 2 weeks past full decay. SCP-1994 was discovered during a raid conducted by the Foundation in collaboration with GRU Division P operatives in the former USSR in 1959. When they raided the laboratory, the Foundation discovered 9 instances of SCP-1994-3. 7 had already died, and 2 were decaying. Dr. Yelkov was nowhere to be found, but the Foundation did recover his notes and journals. The fairies he spoke of in his notes were also nowhere to be found, and the Foundation was unable to confirm their existence for several years. But then, they discovered an instance of SCP-478 in the wild. Dr. Yelkov really had encountered these creatures, captured them, studied them. Any instances of SCP-478 that are found are to be surgically removed from their victims before death and kept in one piece. After they have been recovered, they must be kept in specialized vacuum-sealed lockers in Biosite 66. As instances of SCP-478 do not appear to be able to pass through solid matter, they may be held indefinitely, as long as no damage occurs. Victims who have only been mildly affected by SCP-478 may be given ordinary treatment in a civilian medical establishment, though Foundation surgeons must perform the procedure under the guise of orthodontic surgery. As with ordinary surgery, the patient must be sedated. Victims who have been severely affected by SCP-478 must be taken to Biosite 16 for study. Because of the unique way in which SCP-478 works, infected individuals must not be terminated prematurely. Victims who have been deemed capable of a full recovery are to be treated for infection and released from Foundation custody. After recovering, they must be given a Class B amnestic, and false memories must be planted as to avoid arousing any suspicion. Though the process of infection that SCP-1994-3 instances go through shares some symptoms with an SCP-478 infestation, many of the symptoms differ dramatically. This in particular interests me. It would seem that the chemical components produced by SCP-478 are not the only factor in their effects on the human body. Something else must be responsible, something that requires the physical presence of one of these so-called fairies, rather than just the compounds they secrete or the chemical reactions they cause. Though I disagree deeply with his methodology, I can see why Dr. Yelkov was so compelled to study these creatures. If the Foundation is ever able to track down Dr. Yelkov, provided he is still alive, they may be able to discover more about these tooth fairies. If Dr. Yelkov had left the other nameless researcher alive, he might have learned even more about them, how to communicate with them, for example. If that other man's story is to be believed, these beings are sentient. They have names, their own language, and are capable of intelligent communication. Maybe, with some further study and some cooperative living specimens, the Foundation could learn the secrets of the fairy language just as the other doctor did. Imagine the possibilities if we could speak to these creatures. Perhaps they could ask them why it is they do what they do to us. Perhaps they could broker some sort of peace between the species. Perhaps, and this might be naively optimistic of me, they could ask them to stop. In the meantime, if you find a quarter under your pillow, make sure to check the inside of your mouth. You might just find an uninvited guest. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-2450.
That's just what I was thinking about, is SCP-2450 is so much like this one that they can't just be a coincidence. Like, there has to be a connection between them.
Teeth. Another day.
Because both of these anomalies have to do with teeth, making more of them, and having them erupt in places teeth are not supposed to be in.
Another disastrous pitch meeting. The animator lets out a heavy sigh as he unlocks the door to his house, all but tossing his bag to the ground when he enters the living room. He takes off his coat and leaves it where it fell, kicks off his shoes, and doesn't stop moving until he enters his bedroom. With all of the frustrated energy he has accumulated throughout this extremely tiresome day, he throws himself onto his bed with a groan. He grabs the closest pillow, shoves his face into it, and lets out a long, loud scream of disappointment.
Like, there has to be some connection between the two, but I don't know what it is. They both create actual, like, teeth. Although it seems one of them wants the subject to die, the other one just doesn't, maybe? If I remember correctly, the other one doesn't kill the person they create the teeth in, it just disfigures them usually.
The day started off promising enough, with a meeting he was lucky to get. But as soon as the producers started checking his phone 5 minutes in, he knew the whole pursuit was doomed. He prepped meticulously, concept art, a binder full of episode pitches, and a flashy presentation to really showcase the, well, show. But after all that work, the producer, who barely gave him a single look the entire time, said that no one is looking to buy original shows right now. Remakes and existing intellectual property are really what the market is suited for at the moment. So he was sent back home with nothing but wounded pride and wasted time to show for all that hard work. If it was the only one this month, he might not feel so despondent. But the fact is, this was only the latest in a long series of letdowns. Even with previous successes under his belt and a stint on a successful show, no one is buying what he's selling. So what now? What's next? Tear the whole thing up and start over again? Order a pizza and stay in bed all weekend? Maybe he should go for a walk and clear his head. No, none of that sounds quite right. There's only one thing to do when his mood gets this bad. Sit down at the drafting table and get back to drawing. It's the only way to clear his head, leave it all on the page, and get a clean start tomorrow. Whatever else happens, he's always got his art, even if no one's buying it right now. He drags himself out of bed, orders that pizza for later, and slumps into his seat, waiting for inspiration to strike. He caps and uncaps his pen over and over again, but nothing comes to mind. With a heavy sigh, he draws a circle. That's something at least. Could be a head, maybe? He adds a line stretching down to form a body. 2 more strokes of the pen to make arms, and 2 longer strokes to make a pair of legs. There, a little faceless stick man. He scribbles a quick pair of eyes, but stops short of a mouth. He feels so voiceless right now, shouting into an industry determined to keep its ears plugged. Maybe this little stick figure is like him in that way. If the stick figure is him, then it's probably just as plagued with doubts as he is. So why not draw those doubts too? He grabs a black pen, scribbling in swathes of darkness all throughout the background. Some of them naturally take shape as he goes. A swarm of ravens delivering portents of doom, black cats weaving between the stick figure's legs. Some of the shapes are just black blobs with glowering red eyes. Others are phantom-like wisps. In the very back, looming over all of it, the animator sketches out a hulking reptilian figure, jaws open wide to expose its sharp, eager teeth. As he sits back and takes a look at his handiwork, the animator feels a pang of guilt over depriving the little stick man of self-expression. As one more touch, he adds a speech bubble next to the stick figure's head and scrawls the words, "Get me out of here." Just then, the doorbell rings. Oh, pizza's here. As his mind turns from artistic pursuits to the hungry growl in his stomach, he abandons the stick figure and all of his shadowy tormentors. He can always come back to it later. For now, he feels a sense of relief. The dark clouds have cleared from his mind, transferred onto the page. Next time he sits down, he'll be able to come up with something great. He just knows it. But for now, pizza and a bit of trashy reality television. After demolishing half of the pizza and a few episodes of some new wilderness survival competition show he's already forgotten the name of, the animator changes into his pajamas, brushes his teeth, and collapses back into bed. Everything will feel better in the morning.
Also, I don't know why, but for some reason I'm completely distracted by the fact this guy's face reminds me of like a weasel for some reason. Like, I'm completely engrossed in the fact this man has a weasel face.
Always does. Or at least, it does most of the time. After a moment, he sinks into a deep, dreamless sleep. But rather than waking up to the chiming of his alarm clock, the animator wakes after only a few hours to the unmistakable feeling of being watched. He forces his heavy eyelids open, scanning the room as his heart races with the dread he can't.
Hold on. We saw that chicken clock in the one with the crazy water gun. Ooh. Is that like a bit of hidden lore we get?
Can't put into words. There's no one in here. Nothing unusual except... Is that his stick figure drawing? It's leaning against the wall now. He left it flat on the table, right? As he squints at it in the darkness, he notices something strange. He can see the stick figure, but not the shadowy figures around it. The speech bubble is gone too. Wait, there's no paper? It's just his stick figure, standing against the wall.
Oh my gosh, it's so cute! I'm hoping the stick figure is friendly? It's cute, if nothing else, because it's just a little guy. It's a little stick figure with eyeballs.
If it had been peeled off of the page and stuck there.
Little smile expression.
Worrying it could be some kind of sleep paralysis, the man wiggles his toes and clenches his fists. He can move just fine. He's definitely awake. So, what's happening here? He's about to give up and try to go back to sleep when the stick figure takes a step toward him, then another. As the animator watches in wide-eyed disbelief, the stick figure walks across the desk, coming to a stop at the very edge. The man flicks his lamp on, blinking as his eyes adjust to the sudden light. There's no denying it. The stick figure is standing there, staring at him with its wide, hand-drawn eyes.
Aww.
Suddenly, words appear next to the figure, identical in handwriting and color to the words he wrote in the speech bubble. Hello? Where am I? The man blinks for a moment, trying to process it. After a moment, he answers, you're in my room. Why? Honestly, I don't really know. He shakes his head, rubbing at his eyes. When he opens them, there's new text waiting for him. Where did I come from? Do you know? Is this really happening? This all feels completely insane.
Life.
But those eyes are staring at him expectantly, and he feels like he needs to answer. I drew you on that paper back there. You created me? Are you God? The animator bursts out laughing at this. It's all just too absurd, too insane. I'm definitely not God. I don't know what I am. Listen, I'm exhausted. I'm gonna try to get some sleep. Oh, okay. Please don't let me stop you. I'll be here, I think. I don't really know how this all works. Yeah. Good night? The animator switches off the lamp, rolls over, and after a bit of a struggle, manages to fall asleep again. Maybe this was all some really lucid dream, and when he wakes up in the morning, the stick figure will be back on the page where it belongs. The screech of the alarm jolts him from his slumber, and he reaches out to hit the snooze button. As he opens his eyes, he takes in the sight of the room, bathed in the fresh light of day. The previous night was bizarre, but it's all over now. Everything is back to normal. Wait. No, the stick figure is gone from the desk, but it isn't on the page either. In fact, the entire piece of paper, which once held yesterday's drawings, is blank. If it isn't here, then where the hell is it? He rushes downstairs, scanning the entire house for the sight of the stick figure. He spots it, standing on the kitchen counter, looking intently at the magnets on the refrigerator. When it sees him, it begins to speak again. Well, to manifest words next to its head. "Oh, there you are. I'm so glad you're back. I have so many questions. What am I? Why am I here? Oh, and what are these horrible voices? They keep saying the most terrifying things to me." The stick figure never gets an answer, as the shock of the encounter makes the animator's knees collapse. He slumps to the floor, completely overwhelmed. When he comes back to his senses, he makes a call to a local psychiatrist. Whatever's gone wrong with his brain, he's intent on fixing it. What this poor, troubled animator doesn't realize is that he is perfectly sane. He's just sharing his home with SCP-3052. SCP-3052 is a designation given to two separate entities, SCP-3052-1 and SCP-3052-2. SCP-3052-1 is a humanoid entity that best resembles a hand-drawn, and somewhat poorly drawn at that, copper-colored stick figure. There are two circular holes drawn in the entity's head, which appear to function as its eyes. Though SCP-3052-1 is believed to be two-dimensional, anyone facing the entity seems to perceive it as facing them directly, regardless of the angle or direction it is viewed from. Due to this effect, the exact dimensions of the entity have not yet been determined. The entity has been X-rayed, allowing for a better understanding of its physiology, and it has been found to lack both a skeletal structure and any organs. After this revelation, some samples were taken from SCP-3052-1's body and analyzed. These samples were found to consist of a mixture of spray paint, acrylic paint, and, strangely enough, human blood. Though SCP-3052-1 has no visible hands, its arms ending in flat pencil strokes like most stick figures do, it has proven itself capable of picking up, holding, and moving objects as if it did have hands. The figure has not shown or expressed a need for food or water. Even if it did, it is uncertain where that food or water would go, as the figure has no mouth that can be seen. As the lack of mouth might imply, the entity is not capable of speech or any other vocalizations. However, it is able to effectively communicate via words that manifest visually near its head and linger there for approximately 7 to 10 seconds at a time. These words are made up of the same substances as SCP-3052-1's body, and like the entity's body, they will face a viewer directly, no matter what angle they are viewed from. SCP-3052-1 is sparing in its communication, but has displayed a large vocabulary and intelligence on par with an average human adult. During its communications, the entity expressed that it was struggling with mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, and mild schizophrenia. An initial intake session with the on-site psychologist confirmed these self-diagnoses and kickstarted SCP-3052-1's weekly therapy sessions. The anomalous effects of SCP-3052-1 extend beyond the obvious. It is a living stick figure, yes, but there is more to the story than that. Whenever the entity is photographed or recorded on video, additional subjects can be seen in the resulting photo or video footage. These subjects, which cannot be seen in person with the naked eye, are designated SCP-3052-2. These instances are black entities with vivid red eyes, composed in a similar hand-drawn manner to SCP-3052-1. The entities are often shapeless, appearing like a blob or shadow with red eyes, but they do occasionally take on the shapes of various animals, such as crows, cats, and a large unidentified reptile. These instances communicate in the same manner as SCP-3052-1, though their letters are black as opposed to copper. These instances do not attempt to communicate with anyone other than SCP-3052-1, and the communications are not exactly friendly. SCP-3052-2 has a habit of harassing, threatening, and otherwise verbally abusing SCP-3052-1. It tends to claim that the Foundation is planning to terminate SCP-3052-1, though there are, as far as I can tell, no Foundation plans for its termination. SCP-3052-1 rarely responds aside from a nod, but will occasionally voice agreement with SCP-3052-2. The SCP Foundation first discovered SCP-3052-1 on June 19th of a redacted year, when it was living in the home of an anonymous digital animator. The animator, thought to be the creator of SCP-3052-1, was found in his bedroom, where he had perished due to complications from his antipsychotic medication. Oddly enough, blood samples from the deceased animator did not match the blood found in the samples of SCP-3052-1's body.
So where did the
The
blood
origin
come
of that blood is still unknown, and no DNA matches have been found so far. Due to its regular cooperation and compliance with the Foundation and its research,
That's not good.
SCP-3052-1 has been given the ability to request items and amenities to boost its morale. All of the requests
Did I see that correctly? I did. Oh my god. Okay, real quick, let's appreciate the play stick poster here. Very funny. Ha ha ha. Very funny. Funny.
the ability to request items and amenities to boost its morale. All of the requests have been officially logged in its file. First, the entity asked for a blank journal and a pen, which it was given. Since then, the entity journals every day and shares its entries with the psychologist during their sessions. Next, it requested a television, a DVD player, and a selection of various DVDs. Most of these were animated comedies, though a wide variety of other genres were also represented. Wanting to spruce up its containment chamber, the entity requested a potted houseplant next. The request was granted, but there was an oversight. The entity had no way to water the plant. The plant quickly expired, plunging SCP-3052-1 into a guilt-ridden depressive episode.
Oh,
As a
poor
therapeutic
thing.
measure, the entity was given a new houseplant and a watering can. This time, it was able to keep the plant alive, vastly improving its mood. So far, SCP-3052-1 has not requested anything else, but the ability to do so is still on the table. All of SCP-3052-1's conversations with its psychologist are taped, but most of the footage is kept private. Doctor-patient confidentiality still applies to living stick figures, as it turns out. There is one excerpt from a session that has been archived in the official file, however, which can offer a window into the entity's usual therapeutic process. The psychologist's identity has been redacted from the file, so for our purposes, I will simply refer to them as Dr. X. Dr. X began the session with a standard greeting. "How are you today?" SCP-3052-1 shrugged. "Kind of tired." Dr. X made a note of this, then continued. "Have you been having trouble sleeping?" SCP-3052-1 nodded. "I keep having the dreams." Dr. X made
Here.
another note. "Yes, you've told me about them. Have you written them down as I advised?" SCP-3052-1 shook its head. "I keep forgetting, sorry." Dr. X's expression was sympathetic, their tone of voice calm. "There's no need to apologize, it's completely optional. Still, it might help. Do you still hear the voices?" "All the time." "Do they sound like anyone you know?" Dr. X asked. Again, SCP-3052-1 shrugged. "I don't know a lot of people." "What sort of things do they say?" There was a long pause, during which SCP-3052-1 did not respond. Dr. X filled the silence. "If you don't feel comfortable discussing it, that's..." SCP-3052-1 cut them off, saying, "They say you're going to kill me." "Who is going to kill you?" "I'm not sure. Whoever works here, I guess." Dr. X made several notes, then spoke again. "Do you believe we're going to kill you?" There was another long pause. Then the response appeared next to SCP-3052-1's head. "I don't know." "Do you feel like you're in danger staying here?" "Sometimes." "I see. Have you been experiencing any visual hallucinations?" "Like seeing things?" "Precisely." SCP-3052-1 shook its head. "Not really, no." Nothing unusual or strange? I don't think so. I see. Dr. X made one more note. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? After a moment, SCP-3052-1 said, My watering can's almost empty. Dr. X nodded. I'll let someone know. Following this session, Dr. X concluded that SCP-3052-1 is likely unable to see instances of SCP-3052-2 and perceives
So it can hear them, but it can't see them. I guess that makes sense. You can hear the thoughts in your head, like the bad thoughts in your head telling you all the bad things, but you can't see them.
them as disembodied voices. If you are concerned about the watering can and the well-being of the plant, the can was refilled after the session. A little while later, SCP-3052-1 was seen watering the plant, which is currently thriving. There is one more addendum to the official file for SCP-3052 that I found to be notable. It is a transcript of a video that captured a conversation between SCP-3052-1 and SCP-3052-2. SCP-3052-1 was sitting at its desk in its containment chamber, staring at the wall of its cell. After about 45 seconds of inactivity, an instance of SCP-3052-2, in the shape of an unidentified large reptile, skulked into frame from the left. It stopped about 15 centimeters away from SCP-3052-1, who did not turn to look at it. It did, however, acknowledge its presence when the reptile began to speak. Just as the stick figure had described in its therapy session, the reptile warned of impending doom. They're going to kill you, you know. The figure responded simply, I know. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. You might as well just let them. You'd be doing the world an enormous favor. SCP-3052-1 shrugged. Yeah, probably. When SCP-3052-2 spoke again, the words appeared in rapid succession, as if the reptile was delivering an impassioned speech. It's your fault that you're in here. If you had just kept your mouth shut and not asked him any damn questions, this wouldn't be happening. Where am I? What are these voices? Are you God? There is no God, idiot. He's dead, remember? He's dead and you killed him. Just like that. All because you opened your stupid mouth. Now you're going to hell, and it's all your fault. After this, the entity sat in silence for about 20 seconds.
Jesus.
After a moment, SCP-3052-2 broke the silence. I'm going away now. I can't stand looking at you. Then SCP-3052-2 slowly moved out of frame, leaving the stick figure alone with its thoughts. SCP-3052-1 is
That's
currently
a
kept in a
shitty
standard
exit.
humanoid containment chamber. The entity's containment is monitored constantly via video surveillance, which is manned by staff with Level 2 clearance or higher. SCP-3052-1 is granted one session per week with the on-site psychologist for the sake of maintaining its mental health. These sessions are also monitored via video surveillance by Level 2 staff or higher. Should the entity make any official requests, these must be directed to and approved by a staff member of Level 4 or higher. Speaking of requests, there have been proposals by members of the research team requesting experiments that would involve showing SCP-3052-1 recordings of SCP-3052-2 instances. These requests are currently pending approval. When SCP-3052-
I mean, I feel like that's a bad idea. I feel like that's a bad thing to do. I don't know. Maybe seeing the fact that the voices they're hearing are actual things floating around it might help, but I also could see it doing a lot more damage than good. Excuse me.
1 was caught on video being tormented by SCP-3052-2. The reptile spoke to the stick figure of God. I may be out of line here, this is just a hypothesis, but I believe it was possibly referring to that deceased animator, the one found in the same house where SCP-3052-1 was first discovered. If he did, in fact, create SCP-3052-1, and, by extension, SCP-3052-2, then it would only make sense for his creations to view him as their god. Perhaps the appearance of SCP-3052-1 took a toll on the man's sanity, driving him to the edge until it cost him his life. Perhaps SCP-3052-2 is not a separate entity at all, but rather the manifestation of SCP-3052-1's guilty conscience. If that is the case, then it is entirely possible that continued therapy sessions will eradicate SCP-3052-2 altogether. Of course, I could be wrong. It's happened before. But the idea that SCP-3052-1 could eventually find some peace, a sense of safety and freedom from the guilt that follows it like a shadow is an enticingly comforting one. After all, if even a two-dimensional living stick figure can heal from its trauma, cast off the yoke of shame and fear around its neck, and live a happier life, maybe there's hope for us all with our three-dimensional troubles. Or maybe not. But isn't it a nice thought just the same? Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-1966, Sentient Body Scanner.
Let's finish up this last video, and then that'll be it for tonight. You alright? Oh wow, a cool bobcat. I think that's a bobcat. It might not be. Layla. Considering its name is Lila, I'm thinking it might actually be a lynx. Yeah, that more looks like a lynx. Okay. Oh, there's more. Oh dear. That's not good. Body? You already have one there, friend. Okay then. Well, that was certainly intriguing. Well, anyways, that'll be it for tonight. So, I guess enjoy the rest of your night. Stay out of traffic, stay out of car engines, and stay hydrated. Good night. Goodbye. Good night. See you on Tuesday.